talks. With hopes of a decisive victory on the battleground fading, the initial attitude seems to be changing. But there hasn't been any sign of mutual concessions that could lead to peace. Mohammed Val, Al Jazeera, Port Sudan.
A hung parliament in Spain appears increasingly likely after the general election on Sunday failed to find a clear winner. The Conservative People's Party won most seats but fell short of a majority. Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez of the ruling Socialist Workers' Party described the result as a defeat for the far right. But for more on this, let's cross to Sonia Gallego in Madrid. So, Sonia, given this unclear result in terms of who's actually going to govern, what happens now?
Well, really, the country is headed into a sort of political limbo, as it were, where it hasn't given any clear answer in this election as to which direction it intends to head off in. And that could be in part could be interpreted as a sort of partial success from Pedro Sanchez's risky gamble to call a snap election in the first place. He did make this campaign about Spain choosing whether it decides to stick with the socialists and what he says is their progressive vision for the future. Also, he did warn quite a lot in his campaign about the possibility of the centre-right People's Party or making a pact with the far-right Vox Party. And given that Vox have lost quite a bit of support, it seems that enough people were put off by that prospect to not vote for that scenario. Nevertheless, his personal approval ratings are low enough that it still wasn't able to be translated into an outright majority for his party or indeed his vision.
You touched on the voters there. I mean, what does this tell us about the Spanish voters' attitude to the main political parties?
Well, they're at a crossroads yet again, and this is a scenario that we've seen in recent years as well, where the country just seems undecided as to exactly where its future lies. But the vision that Sanchez has offered is also quite a divisive one as well. Many who oppose his vision fear that his version of progress goes against certain traditional and ideological stances that many here in the country, certainly enough people in the country, hold to be able to block that path to progress, as Sanchez says. There has been a lot of controversy surrounding certain policies that he's made around protection of minorities, around climate change, and how he sees the economy as well. And the People's Party has responded by saying it wants to have an antidote with cuts to spending, as well as rolling back some of those protections that were put into place. Still, the best scenario for both parties would be for there to be another general election to be held later in the year, where either one can shore up enough support to be able to gain some kind of majority.
In Madrid for us there, Sonia Gallego, thank you. Russia says 2 drones have been intercepted and destroyed near the Defense Ministry in the capital. Russian officials accuse Ukraine of an attempted terror attack on Moscow. The drones reportedly struck non-residential buildings. Yulia Shapovalova has more from Moscow.
Moscow central districts were attacked by 2 UAVs. One of them hit a business center. The other one fell in close proximity to the building of the Russian Ministry of Defense. Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin said the drones hit 2 non-residential buildings, but none of them was seriously damaged. No casualties were reported either. Currently, there is a number of ambulances and police cars spotted in the center of Moscow. The mayor's office also said that the traffic on the 2 major avenues close to the place of the attacks have temporarily been suspended. Russia's Ministry of Defense blamed Ukraine for the strikes, saying, quote, "It was an attempt by the Kiev regime to carry out a terrorist attack." Both UAVs were jammed by electronic warfare and then crashed. Local residents reported multiple cases of broken glass in the windows due to the UAV's attacks. Well, there were multiple drone attacks in Crimea too this morning. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported about 17 drones destroyed over Crimea. The ministry claimed there were no casualties in the attack, but local residents are now being evacuated to safer places. Russian-appointed governor of Crimea, Aksyonov, announced there was a hit on the ammunition depot in the Jankoy region. Also, the debris damaged a private house in the Kirovsky district. Traffic on the Crimean bridge is temporarily closed, as well as some roads near the site of the attacks. By the way, we're getting reports that the traffic is now being restored. No one claimed responsibility for the Crimea attacks. The Russian side doesn't speak about it either. Yulia Shapovalova, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
Still ahead on Al Jazeera, the UN releases a report accusing mercenary groups like Wagner for extrajudicial killings in Mali. We'll have those details for you. And deciding the future of deep-sea mining, government representatives gather in Jamaica to discuss if or when drilling should happen.
Frank assessments.
$3 billion. Is it going to be enough to get Pakistan's economy back on track?
The short answer is no.
Informed opinions.
For those who are attempting to flee to Chad, how dangerous is that journey?
It is incredibly difficult. Many people do manage to get out, but at a great cost.
In-depth analysis of the day's headlines.
The question is really who controls what goes on in outer space in the future? Will it be governments or will it be big private corporations and individual super wealthy billionaires?
Inside Story on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back. A reminder of our top stories this hour. Israel's parliament begins voting on one aspect of the controversial changes to the judicial system. There have been scuffles between police and protesters who blocked the road outside the Knesset. Firefighters in Greece are struggling to contain more than 80 wildfires burning across the country. Earlier, around 20,000 people were taken off the island of Rhodes in the largest wildfire evacuation operation in Greek history. It's 100 days since fighting started in Sudan between the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. The UN Human Rights Council describes the power struggle as reckless and senseless. Human Rights Watch has released a report on extrajudicial killings in Mali. It says dozens of people have been forcibly disappeared or executed since December. The organization blames the military and mercenaries from Russia's Wagner Group. The report says civilian property was looted and destroyed. Mali's government says it's not aware of any human rights violations. Ilaria Aligrossi is a senior researcher at Human Rights Watch. She says many Malians have become victims, caught up in the government's fight against armed groups.
We investigated serious abuses by the Malian army and foreign fighters in central Mali during counterinsurgency operations. Our findings are based on interviews with over 40 victims and witnesses of such operations. I think it's important to remember that Mali is experiencing a devastating conflict since almost a decade now because of the presence in the country of armed Islamist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And in response to the brutal, deadly attacks by those groups, the Malian government has engaged in a lethal counterinsurgency strategy, which is costing many lives and causing suffering and devastation. We documented abuses by both the Malian army and foreign fighters. These foreign fighters, we believe they belong to the Russia-linked paramilitary group Wagner. As you know, Wagner has a gruesome reputation in not only Mali, but in other African countries, including Central African Republic and Libya. An appalling human rights record. The group has been accused of war crimes and robbing the African continent of its mineral wealth. So the fact that they are involved with the Malian army in abusive counterinsurgency operations should raise questions and should push the Malian government to address the abuses and hold perpetrators accountable.
Libya and Malta say joint sea drills designed to deter migrants from crossing the Mediterranean have been a success. Coast guards in both countries prevented fewer people arriving on the island. Anyone caught or rescued are being returned to Libya. Malik Triana has more on this now.
Malta is a small island strategically located in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. It's been called the Gate to Europe. North Africa has long been a transit hub for migrants trying to reach European shores. Now, that led to an agreement signed in 2020 between Libya and Malta aimed at curbing migration, and that's seen significant results. In 2019, more than 3,400 migrants arrived here in Malta through the Mediterranean Sea from Libya. But after the agreement, those numbers have drastically declined. So far this year, only 142 migrants have been able to reach Malta, and that's because of the close cooperation between the Libyan and Maltese coast guards. Now today, just a few kilometers away from here, is the last day of the first ever naval drills between Libya and Malta. The drills are aimed at training the Libyans, building up their capacity in search and rescue operations, in medical evacuations, and in general inspections of vessels. So far this year, more than 8,800 people have been intercepted at sea by the Libyan authorities and brought back to Libya. Human rights organizations, the UN Refugee Agency, the International Organization for Migration say that Libya is not a safe country and cannot be a safe place for disembarkation. With these naval drills coming to an end today, Libyan officials say that while this is the first joint exercise, they hope it's not the last. Malik Traina, Al Jazeera, Valletta, Malta.
Greta Thunberg has been convicted of disobeying police during a protest against the oil industry in Sweden. The 20-year-old climate change activist was detained last month in the port city of Malmö. Thunberg and other activists were arrested after they stopped traffic at an oil terminal. Paul Rees has more from Malmö in Sweden.
We're outside the Tingsrätt court here in Malmö, which is kind of the lowest level court in the land, equivalent to maybe a magistrate's court in the UK, where the accused will basically have their first ever contact with the Swedish legal system. Greta Thunberg appeared here, followed by a phalanx of international media, and then sat alone looking quite a small figure in front of four of the judges, accused of disobeying police at this protest at the oil facility in Malmö here in June. We were showed a video where the police filmed her being asked to leave after they'd stopped tankers from leaving and coming in. They refused, and then the police had to physically move them out of the way. Now, this is an offence, disobeying the police, that can carry a punishment of up to 6 months in prison. Defending herself, Thunberg said that although she recognised what she was in court for, that we found ourselves in an emergency situation, and she was acting out of an emergency situation to save the planet due to climate change. Anyway, the upshot of all of this is the panel decide what the decision would be, and she's been fined 30 times 50 Swedish crowns, which is about $150.
Now, representatives of governments worldwide are deciding if they're ready to impose a moratorium on deep-sea mining. Temporary contracts to begin drilling will automatically be awarded if they don't act soon. John Holman has more on the meeting in Jamaica.
The Earth's last great frontier. We have better maps of Mars and the Moon than the ocean floor, but we may be on the verge of starting to mine there. Many of the world's nations are coming together in Kingston, Jamaica, as part of the International Seabed Authority's annual meeting to talk about if or when that should happen. It's with a sense of urgency. In 2021, the small island of Nauru asked to begin deep-sea mining by the subsidiary of a firm called the Metals Company. Under UN rules, the authority had 2 years to come up with regulations regarding mining. They didn't. Now Nauru and the Metals Company is allowed to start operations regardless. There is another option, a long-term moratorium on deep-sea mining altogether. That's what some countries and conservationists are pushing for.
This activity would result in species extinctions and could potentially impact the ocean's climate regulatory functions, including carbon cycling and storage.
The metals company, on the other hand, says that its deep-sea mining would be localised in one small area of the Clarion-Clipperton zone between Hawaii and Mexico, and that sediment displacement, which critics say would cloud water for thousands of kilometres, wouldn't reach nearly so far.
Last year, MIT published 3 peer-reviewed papers which confirmed that the sediment on the seafloor only rises about 2 meters above the ocean floor, and up to 98% of it settles in the test area.
A note on that. Environmentalists say there would also be a separate, potentially large sediment discharge from the collection ship. Gerard Barron also says that the metals found on the seabed are essential, not least for green transport like electric cars, and that it's better to get them from there than elsewhere.
What we have to pursue is where can we get a secure supply of these important base metals and battery metals with the lightest planetary touch and the lightest human touch. And from our investigation, there's only one answer.
The metals companies say they could begin mining in the deep sea now, but prefer to wait for regulations, if they're coming. But the Costa Rican delegation at the talks feels that countries are being overly rushed to decide on a mining code.
Because we cannot accept artificial dates. We will finish when we're ready to finish. The value of the ocean, which belongs to humanity, is larger than any investment. And we need to be able to look to our children and grandchildren in their eyes and know that we did what was right.
Across this debate, the key questions remain. Do we need to mine the deep sea bed? And if so, can it wait till we're sure of its impacts on the planet? John Holman, Al Jazeera.
And you can find more information, news and features on our website, aljazeera.com, on all your devices. The weather is up next. An inside story will examine Donald Trump's mounting legal woes and what impact it might have on his election campaign. Do stay with us here on Al Jazeera.
Our typhoon is really cooking up in the Philippine Sea. Hey everyone, here's the detail.